science to suggest that, to a certain point, more income can create happiness. It can facilitate happiness because you feel more secure, at least. But after a certain point, it does not have any positive effect. All right, let's see. Bill, welcome. Money Therapy.
We're back.
All right, I'm Brandon Chasteen. Let's talk about marginal utility.
Yeah.
What is that?
I don't know, man. A lot of people have different definitions for it, but it's definitely an interesting concept,
So
it's kind of like there's a thin line between, almost like a point of no return concept. There's a thin line between too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
So marginal utility is kind of an economic theory. Typically, I don't like to jump in too deep into boring stuff, which is not true because I have a financial podcast.
Yeah.
So it's pretty boring by nature, but let's see why I decided to talk about marginal utility is because I really feel we're about to head into 2024.
Yeah.
We get towards the end of the year, and we're going to do a couple more shows on a couple thoughts that are going to kind of spill over from this.
Yeah.
In the next couple weeks or months. But this is, as we start thinking about the future, I need people to start thinking about their perspective. And I really need people to start thinking about, what do I want?
Yeah.
But from a place of what is enough.
Sure.
First, and I'm writing this thing out right now. It's a very young thought in my brain, but this notion of living consequently versus living idealistically, and to draw on that a little bit, just to understand where my thought is I think it's important that we almost live consequently.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're living consequently, you're measuring what you have right now based on where you came from. If you're living idealistically, you're measuring where you're at right now based on some made up, make believe place where you feel great and life is good.
Yeah.
Right? So, and if that's the case, we're living in this idealistic, forward looking place where we're actually not present. We're looking back on ourselves like Brandon doesn't have enough where he's at right now because of where he wants to be in this altruistic life.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be satisfied. I'm always going to be I should have more right now.
Yeah.
Whereas if I say, hey, Brandon was like this punk kid that almost failed out of high school and probably doesn't deserve anything that he has today, but fought tooth and nail for everything, joined the military to even be able to attain a college education. If I say this is where I've been, and consequently because of everything that I've fought for, now I have my own company. I have people in life that love me, right? I have clients that trust me. I have friends that are friendly to me, are good friends. So consequently, because of my endeavors, because of my grit, I have more than I ever thought.
Yeah.
Now, if I can take that place and then say, let's think about what I want my future to look like. If I'm present now in this consequent thought, right? Temporal mode, maybe. If I'm here and I'm thinking about my future from here, it's so much easier to see the next steps. It's so much, there's so much less fog about what I want my future to look like.
Yeah.
And even if I don't hit every benchmark that I set for myself, I will always be grateful for where I'm at.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if I'm just always thinking about, oh, everybody else has this, or I deserve so much more, this is what I want my life to, I just want my life to be this. Well, then I'm stuck always ranking where I'm at now as not where I should be. And that's just so deflating,
Yeah.
right? So
What do they say? They say the comparison is the thief of joy.
yeah,
I've heard that a lot.
and so that's I've been working on this thought because we're getting into a season of talking about goals and future and what do we want out of 2024? What are we thankful for in 2023? Like what have we accomplished? And I need people to be in the right mindset. We just did an episode last week about perception, right? Days, not or decades, not days.
Yeah.
And this idea that we get to choose how we see things.
Yeah.
And so as we're going into this, it's going to be kind of thematic for a little bit. We're going to draw a lot on this end of the year stuff because, I want everybody to crush their Q4s.
Yeah.
There's still lots of work to be done, but there's also this balance in the last couple months of the year where we start thinking what I've accomplished.
Yeah.
And what I need out of next year. How do I grow? How do I stay on a path to an ultimate destination?
Yeah.
Right? What are my values? Have my values shifted? How are these, the top shelf people in my life, like who are they? Taking inventory of the people that love me and the people I love and making sure I'm spending time there. So as we do this, marginal utility came up and it's pretty simple. So if you're in my email series, it basically, to paint the picture of what marginal utility is, it's this. Sometimes when I go home, I buy a pint of ice cream on my way, and I eat the pint of ice cream. To be clear, I eat the pint of ice cream all at once, right?
Right.
Like sometimes that's important to do, and I do it. But here's the experience, and here this defines marginal utility perfectly.
Yeah.
Bite number 1, best thing ever, made my day better. Mm-hmm. Bite numbers like 2 through 5, 2 through 10, really good.
Yeah.
I'm settling in.
Yeah.
This is my evening time. Shoes are off. I'm great.
Yeah.
Bites 11 through 15 are like, that's fine. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of the bites are actually making me sick.
Yeah.
But I continue to do it because I'm committed to the cause and I want to finish my pint of ice cream.
Right.
Even though I know that at this point it's not bringing me any happiness or any type of good feeling.
Yeah.
That's marginal utility. At a certain point, more does not make me any happier. It doesn't make me financially safer. It doesn't increase my financial security. It doesn't do any more is toxic.
Yeah.
Enough is perfect.
Yeah.
And so as we start thinking about our future, don't fall into the trap of just thinking about more. It's okay.
Yeah.
The whole point of this life, this race to call it retirement or whatever, is at some point I want to have enough.
Yeah.
People always say that to us.
Yeah.
I just want to have enough to retire by the time I'm 65.
Yeah.
Okay. But then when there's like 63, like, well, if I give a little bit more, no. Right? Because then we're always chasing the more monster.
Yeah.
And that's toxic. It leads to mistakes. And it doesn't increase your happiness and it doesn't increase your security, peace of mind. So if that's true, I think it's just really important to decide what enough is. And we have to be good at understanding how to define enough.
Yeah. I think as a culture, we have kind of an interesting experiment that happens every year towards the end of the year. They call it New Year's resolutions. But basically, effectively, what's happening is people are lifting up their heads and, trying to project out in the future what they actually want. And I think that's why we focus so much here on goals and not only just, very specific goals being very important.
Yeah.
Because how often do we actually sit around and we decide what we want? Not only what we want, but what is enough. And so you have to take into account things like, you mentioned gratefulness. So where am I at today? What am I grateful for? I don't want my friends, my family, I don't want those things to fall apart because I love those things. You know, I have people in my life that love me, friends and family. You're going to have to maintain that. So what does that look like? You know, and that's totally, most of the time, not financial, right? And then, again, where do you want to go from there? Right? So it gives you something to strive for. But again, it's got to be specific. If you chase numbers all the time, just like you were talking about, I think you're going to find that whenever you hit that number, there's always more numbers you can chase. You know, I think it was Bruce Lee that said, you know, numbers are infinite. So if you're chasing numbers, you'll always be chasing, you know, you'll never be happy, is essentially.
That was Bruce Lee?
Or somebody. I think it was Bruce Lee.
That's cool. And then he just like karate chopped something?
I hope so.
I hope so too.
I like to think of it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, give yourself, we call them SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. And that gives you a way out of not spending your whole life chasing something that you may not even want. You know, maybe you may say, I want a yacht and I want a private jet, a private plane. I want all these things, but you may not be willing to work for them. Some people are, you know, like Mark Cuban, definitely willing to work for those things, right? But he probably works 100 freaking hours a week. I mean, he's working all the time. And some people love that. Some people, you know, don't want to do that. And that's more than fine, but it's not helpful to say, oh, I got to have the yacht and the private jet in order to be happy, and I keep falling short of that. You got to be realistic with yourself. And you can start small. And once you hit that goal, you can then reevaluate and say, okay, you know, this is where I came from. Is this enough for me? Why isn't it enough? Am I just chasing a number? But at least I got here. I accomplished something. I accomplished my goal that I set out, no matter how small it is. Now I get to reevaluate for the next step.
Yeah. Solid. I think so really the first point in this is understanding that marginal utility. The biggest principle in this is this law of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And how critical it is through goals, through properly setting appropriate goals, we can start to define what is enough versus just chasing more.
Yeah.
And then getting karate chopped by Bruce Lee.
Right.
So point number 2 is, I think inside of this, if we're like, the idea of marginal utility is we're trying to get to the, like, on a happiness spectrum, we're trying to leverage our resources, our time, our money, our energy to reach a peak of happiness.
Yeah.
Right. And we're trying to I've been, and I might thick, I don't know, Nahat Han, I want to say. Buddha, I'm butchering his name.
Oh, you're sure? Okay.
But he was a like very prominent Buddhist speaker writer.
Yeah.
And he has a quote that I've been loving for the past couple weeks, and that is, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to understand, like, you start defining what your happiness is and put yourself on that path. You don't ever, like, if you're just unhappy and thinking, if I get here, I'll be happy, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. You have to start working on yourself to say, hey, I can be happy now. And then use this concept of, marginal utility to understand how to maximize your time, energy, and resources to be as happy as possible.
Yeah.
And so point number 2, in allocating your resources. So first of all, understand, when it comes to money, like, I don't know that I necessarily get happy by paying my electric bill, but I got to pay my electric bill. And having electricity does increase some of those, like, base needs for me to allow for happiness. Mm-hmm. What's that? Maslow's hierarchy, right? Electricity is pretty important to me. so that I can be happy about a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about allocating resources and inside of a lot of what we're talking about right now is the discretionary spending.
Yeah.
So assuming you got to pay your, food for food and all this other stuff, there's not much you can do about that.
Right.
But most of us do have a discretionary budget, right? So one thing that I found interesting, this is from a guy named Daniel Kahneman,
Yeah.
economist. He developed something called the peak end rule, so the peak dash end. And here, what he said was there's statistical significance that the human experience, when it comes to remembering and or delivering happiness, is more about the peak of the experience and the end of the experience, and has no significance about the duration of the experience.
Yeah.
So when you're seeking out things to spend your money on, you got to think about like the peak of it and the end of it, and understand if you can maximize the peak of the moment and the end of the moment, then you're going to, according to this research, maximize your happiness out of that one experience. So for example, if I go and spend, $10,000 on traveling all across Europe,
Yeah.
that in and of itself will be an incredible experience. No doubt.
Yeah.
But in that, let's call it let's say I have to do it for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
In that 3 weeks, there's still only one peak and an end. Right? So what this study might suggest is I would be better off doing 5 different $2,000 trips, to where each experience has instead of going to Germany and Turkey and I don't know, Spain, all these other countries all through one trip.
Yeah.
Separating them into distinctly different ones, because instead of having one peak and one end to a 3-week journey, I could have 5 peaks and 5 ends to 5 separate smaller journeys. So we can do this with a lot of things. Like, for example, let's say I want to reward myself for something. I hit a major goal.
Yeah.
Right? I like whenever I have certain things in my business, and when I deliver on those things, I like to reward myself by enjoying a steak dinner.
Yeah.
Right. I also have a very certain thing that when it occurs in business, I reward myself by buying a new pair of shoes. Typically it's cowboy boots, or I'm actually a huge fan of old Jordans.
Okay.
So sometimes I'll go and buy those.
Yeah.
But it's very specific. Now, could it happen to where both things happen at once? So I do a whole evening where I go out to a steak dinner and go buy a new pair of shoes. Sure. But in that evening, I would have one peak and one end. Whereas if I separate the two and do a shoe day and a steak day on different, I'm creating more of the peaks and ends. So allocating resources, think about that, and think about how many times do we do something where we try to do so much in one event to maximize time, but we're not actually again, we're mushing experiences together, and it's just one peak and one end. Even if I have 10 different really great experiences, the prolonged duration of happiness will be only the one peak is what we'll remember. So
my wife Sarah and I, we actually did a month Europe trip back in the day, and it's kind of funny you say that, but we went to a bunch of different countries, and basically we ended up cutting out all of Italy. We wanted to go to Rome and Venice and spend a week in Italy traveling around, but we were doing so much in Europe that after we spent a month in Europe, and after a week we realized that we'll be exhausted, and we won't even really enjoy Italy, because we'll just be so tired all the time from all the travel.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to go and enjoy it and remember everything. And so we cut out a ton of the trip, and we lengthened the time that we stayed at some of the different places for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
We didn't have time to do 5 different trips to Europe, but we had time to space out the times that we could really take it in and have bigger peaks within that trip. But anyway, just another example of, you may think we have this goal of going all, 8 different countries and Italy. But you may like kill yourself trying to do it. I mean, it might just, and same thing with a job, right? I mean, I may want to make $300,000 a year, but I might never see my kids and my wife, right? Because I have to dedicate that much time in my industry in order to make that kind of money. So again, too much of a good thing can cause unintended consequences, can be a con within itself.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break, listen to our sponsor, and we'll come back for the last 3 of the 5 keys to understanding and applying the concepts of marginal utility. A few years ago, I had the privilege of working with a wonderful couple that had big goals and an incredible work ethic. They made sacrifices and achieved tremendous success and even got to enjoy an early retirement. But tragically, the wife passed away after just 6 months of that retirement life. This experience shook me to the core and led me to reevaluate how I approach financial planning with my clients. I developed an ideology based on 5 pillars of fitness and happiness, and in no particular order, the pillars of finance, faith, physical and emotional well-being, and mental health. While I'm not a doctor, priest, or psychologist, I believe in the importance of addressing all of these pillars holistically alongside financial fitness. A few months ago, I decided to prioritize my own physical health. I focused on everything from eating well to sleeping better. However, I really struggled to find the right motivation to become a regular at the gym. That's when I reached out to an old friend and fitness professional, Sean Rodman. Sean has been a warfighter in the U.S. Army for 20 years. While serving, he acquired all kinds of fitness certificates and was designated to lead fitness programs for our nation's bravest warriors. Not just the fittest ones heading off to war, but also those injured and needing rehabilitation. When he retired, he started an online fitness company, Parabellum Fitness. He builds workout programs tailored to you, your goals, and even considers your old injuries. He also switches things up from week to week or month to month, so nothing ever gets old. In just a few months, I've experienced better sleep, improved mobility, increased energy, weight loss, and freedom from my old injuries. While I want my clients to achieve incredible financial success, I believe it's all for nothing if you cannot enjoy it. Go check out parabellumfitnessllc.com. That's parabellumfitnessllc.com. Follow them on Instagram or TikTok, really any social media platform. Go follow Parabellum Fitness and reach out to Sean. Set up your first month of programming, mention money therapy, and get 25% off. Let's not lose sight of all 5 pillars. Together, let's focus on health and happiness and put energy into creating the best possible life we can. After all, we only get one. All right. We're back. So, law of diminishing returns, marginal utility, allocating resources. We talked about the peak and end rule. Yep. Now, let's talk about inside of this marginal utility. Again, we're trying to maximize the positive effects. So whether that's, you might call it happiness, another person might prioritize like feeling financially safe. That's our own interpretation of what we're trying to create the most of.
Yeah.
And something else is understanding that, again, with discretionary money, prioritizing experience over things. However, I want to caveat, like, if I don't have a car,
yeah,
and I go and buy a car, that's a thing. It is taking me from a pretty immobile state of being to now I can drive a lot more places.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of ROI, like on the emotional front, from purchasing that first car.
Yeah.
But it's when I go to buy the second or third car.
Yeah.
So the key, like, in drawing this out, I want people to understand, like, sometimes we fall prey to like the first time or buying something new as a first thing.
Yeah.
And then the subsequent purchases. So if I did buy a car and it made me really happy and satisfied and I was very proud of it, and then, so, a year later I go out and buy a second car, I might not feel as good, and that might be really disappointing.
Yeah.
Right? So understand that just because something the first time delivers happiness or pride or security, it doesn't mean it has to the next time. And we need to be very cognizant of that, because if we do it the second time and we don't feel good about it, chances are we've passed that like apex of marginal utility and we're on the like the next unit doesn't provide as much downfall.
Yeah.
So it's okay sometimes if we make that second purchase, or the we buy the next unit and we start to realize we crossed that threshold.
Yeah.
It's when we don't take inventory of those lower returns
Yeah.
and we keep repeating it. And then all of a sudden it turns into being detrimental for us, like taking the 29th bite of ice cream.
Yeah.
Now I'm actually hurting my body,
Yeah.
right? But I just want to experience that first bite feeling one more time.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen,
Yeah.
right? So that's really important. Inside of this prioritizing experience over things, I wrote down this Easterlin paradox. Richard Easterlin, another economist, he took this concept of marginal utility and like applied it to income. And there's been a lot of studies I've seen this year.
Yeah.
They're like Harvard has a happiness course right now, and I think you can take it for free if you want to go be a Harvard educated
Happiness
person. But they have this happiness course, and inside there's a ton of research coming out that's all based off of this Easterlin paradox, and that is beyond a certain income level.
Yeah.
You actually do not feel more safe, secure, or happy. Now, a lot of times people are like, "Oh, money can't buy happiness." We're actually going to do a podcast in a month or two, called like buying happiness.
Yeah.
But the whole thing here is that there is science to suggest that to a certain point, more income can create happiness. It can facilitate happiness because you feel more secure.
Yeah.
At least. But after a certain point, it does not have any positive effect.
Yeah.
And when we jump into that episode, I'll be sure to pull up like what some of those studies suggest as like the tipping point for a lot of income, because it's a lot lower than I think a lot of people think.
Yeah, it's depending on what study you're looking at. You're looking at somewhere between 75K and 100,000 as far as I would assume that'd be like a household income as well. But the idea is, as your income increases up to that point, you can enjoy luxuries like air conditioning, which is like a must in the South. You can buy a reliable car and like improve your lifestyle to the point where, above those marks, between, I think it goes as far as to even say between that and being like a billionaire, it doesn't mean that your happiness necessarily goes up. And again, it's kind of that tipping point. Like you can work a ton and have a lot of stuff, but does that necessarily make you happy, or does it stress you out to have all those things?
So 2 more points, wrapping up. This one is pretty like kind of just restating everything. And we're actually going to do almost a show just on this stuff, but cost benefit analysis. So this is just us taking time to think, if I'm going to spend money, what's the cost, what's the benefit, and is the trade-off worth it? Because like the cost is not just the dollars.
Yeah.
I tell this is one thing that I teach my kid about money is I never want her to see the number sign, like the dollar sign of something. I want her to see the dollar sign and immediately think, how many hours does this going to cost me?
Yeah.
Right? Like what kind of work, what kind of, what is this going to cost me beyond just the price tag? So I pay her to do some things for the business at home. She gets an allowance, and it's like, you understand, like, $40 doesn't sound like a big number, but for you, think about how many hours of work that's going to be, how many chores that's going to be.
Yeah.
So it's not just $40. It's an entire day of you doing all of these things and saying, no, I can't hang out with my friends. No, I can't go outside. I can't do this, this, and this. So I'm teaching my kid that, and I think that's important for us, is like when we go to spend money, think about, one, what did I have to do to earn that money? How much did it cost? Did I have to skip dinners with the family? Did I have to sleep away from home a couple nights on a business trip to do this? And then also think, with that money, are there other things that I could do that I know would have bigger impact on my own satisfaction? Right. And realize the cost, and then understand the benefit of purchasing that one thing. Three little sub points here. Buy time, not things.
Yeah.
Right. If we can spend money to increase our time freedom, that's better than buying things. Invest in experiences over things, and spend money on others. So we're actually going to do a show soon about these three things. But that's some of the ways that we can increase marginal utility to that breaking point as much as possible. And the last point that I have is just monitor, because things will creep in, life creep happens, and spending creep happens, and eventually you're like stressed about your spending, not realizing that it's just you're not measuring enough. So monitor what you got, and then adjust what you need to do. Be willing to be like, hey, I actually don't need that. It's not doing anything for me.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
No, I think we're good to go.
Cool. All right, guys. Thanks for your time. See y'all next week. Later.
Adios.
We hope you learned something valuable today. We appreciate you including us in your journey towards financial betterment. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes only, and not to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you, and you have questions about how it might be uniquely applicable to you, please discuss that with a financial professional, or, of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you about your specific questions, needs, or circumstances. We welcome you to reach out to us via our website, harpethwealthpartners.com, or by emailing Brandon at bmc@harpethwealthpartners.com. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice is offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not to be intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult appropriate qualified professionals prior to making a decision. Investing includes risk, including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. We want to thank you for your time, and we look forward to having you back next week.